Welcome to another one of our Facebook Lives.
I am in the process of cleaning out my basement. Now that is no small matter. It's 35 years of collection, including everything that my mother saved from all of my schooling, from grade school through college. She saved every research paper, term paper, test, math problem, whatever it was. And so I'm obviously pitching all of that. But in the course of finding things and rediscovering things, I'm finding all of my notebooks from Kansas State University, and my original major was clothing and textiles. So I ran across this little sheet of paper that I thought was pretty funny. It's called Rules for the Sewing Class. So this would have been 1966, Kansas State University, college level coursework. And the number one rule for rules for the sewing class is enter the room quietly. Get open drawer and get materials out. Remove garment from the closet. But I'm reading on down, and a couple of them really stood out. No talking between girls seated at different tables unless special permission has been given. No talking at sewing machines or pressing areas. But the only one that really applies to me today, and should apply to you as well, is no stitching over pins, no pressing over pins. Now, I don't know so much about the pressing over pins because we now have glass head pins and the heads don't melt and all of that. So I'm not really sure what that was all about in those days. But the no stitching over pins is really important. And it's not about the pins, and it's not about your needle. So you bend a few pins, you might break a needle. That's fixable, doable, sort of an inexpensive sort of thing. But it's really all about the timing of your sewing machine. So remember that every time your sewing machine has to shift and kind of get itself over a pin, it's changing the timing. And that's something that can become kind of expensive over time to repair with your dealer. So just thought I'd keep that in mind. It goes on to 16 items for rules for the sewing machine. Put away work quietly. Pick up scraps. Who does that? Push chairs under table. Who does that? And leave quietly. So apparently I had a teacher who didn't like noise, didn't like voices, didn't want to chit-chat. It was all business. So the business of today is the Sewing Workshop has launched Sew Confident Series 10, 2021, and it is amazing. Thank you so much for all of you who signed up in December and those of you who are still signing up in January. We have our yearly program option and we have our monthly program. Either way, doesn't matter. Our January project is here, and we've sent out the email telling you how to get prepared for the class, what materials to have, what fabrics to have, what kits to order if you want to do that, how to cut out your fabric, get your pattern ready, and get ready for the January 22nd video class that will be emailed, or the link will be emailed to you so that you can watch me demonstrate how to make the new pattern. Now, so you're ordering kits, you're ordering fabric, you're getting organized. Don't forget to order your pattern. The pattern is a download pattern. It is not included in the membership this year. No patterns are included in the membership because it's going to be a mixture of download patterns. It's going to be some printed patterns. It's going to be some new patterns, old patterns. It's an entire mix. So you'll need your pattern, and we are recommending that you download your pattern and either print it out on your home printer, tape the pages together at home, or you can send the pattern off to pdfplotting.com, and they will print it quickly, relatively cheaply, and you'll get it back on big sheets. Or you can take it to your local Kinko's or a copy center. We send it to a company here in Topeka called Topeka Blueprint, and it's a company that specializes in printing large format sheets of paper for architects and designers. So that's another option for you if you live in a city that has that sort of service. So either way, you want to get your pattern. Don't forget to order that because you're going to come up short on January 22nd if you don't have your pattern. The pattern is the Maison Top and Jogger. The top we're going to be making in January, and the joggers we're going to be making in February. So the single purchase of the Maison Top and Joggers pattern will carry over from January to February. So it's a 2-month pattern purchase. And the pattern looks like this. The top is an oversized top. Could be called a sweatshirt. We thought about calling it a sweatshirt, but then we were afraid that, oh, not everybody might want a sweatshirt, and really it's a top, but it's a great looking sweatshirt type garment. Has a band across the bottom that can be made in either ribbing or fabric, and it has a full sleeve that is 3/4 length by the time the drop shoulder hits you correctly. Then the sleeve is below the elbow when you're wearing it. And then the joggers are some elastic waist pants. It has a piece of 1.5-inch wide elastic inside the casing, but it also has a drawstring in it too that's loose in the casing but helps to draw it up and gives it that look of the jogger sweatpants sort of thing. Has a nice pocket, and the bottom has the bottom band at the ankle with a little bit of easing into that. So jogger and top in January, joggers in February. And then we're going to move on to other projects from there. We're going to talk about sweater knits today. And I'm going to use that word sort of generically in a way. We're just talking about fabrics that resemble jersey knits in that they have a vertical rib on the face of the fabric and they have a horizontal loop on the back, just like knit and purl, just like jersey. But they tend to have a softer, slightly heftier look and feel to them. And I'm going to show you some sweater knits in a minute with some coordinating pieces that you could wear for joggers or pants or t-shirts or whatever. But before we get into that, I'm going to talk to you about how to tackle these sweater knits. Most of them are not really very hard to sew, at least the ones that we're talking about today. There are sweater knits that are very open weaved and have holes, so to speak, in them, and you're sewing through air, so we're going to talk about that for a little bit as well. But for the most part, you treat them as if they are a standard jersey knit. The one thing that differs, I think, with sweater knits versus jersey knits is the raw edges don't always look great. When you're cutting out a jersey knit and you leave it raw, you still have a nice clean edge. But with sweater knits, they tend to break out of that edge a little bit and sometimes look like they're going to ravel, or maybe even can run, so to speak, like hosiery, which I used to wear in 1966 to that sewing class. But so you want to be able to think about finishing the edges of sweater knits perhaps more often than you do with a rayon or cotton or silk or wool jersey knit. So how do you deal with the edges? Well, we're going to talk about something else first. I'm ahead of myself just a little bit. So you want to mark these sweater knits, and you always want to do your marking before you remove the pieces from your cutting table. So I'm using an open weave sort of sweater knit here, which is not necessarily what you're going to be using, but I wanted to prove a point here that it's difficult to, in sweater knits and fabrics like this, to actually clip into the seam allowances wherever there are notches. So you might, I know this is probably hard to see, but you might want to use a safety pin to mark where a notch might be. So this is a sleeve pattern, and I have a safety pin at a single notch and at a double notch here. If you're still confused about which is the single and the double, you can always put 2 safety pins for the double notch, a single safety pin for the single notch. For the dot that's at the top of the sleeve, I did do a tailor's tack, and we use a tailor's tack that's a complete stitch. So it creates, in a sense, a loose knot. It's not one of the kinds of tailor's tacks that I used to do in college where I just took a few strands of thread, did one stitch and clipped it off. This is one strand of thread that is a total loop and stitch. And so it stays in there, and it's very precise as to where it should be. So even here, I didn't put a pin. I actually did a tailor tack at the top of the sleeve. Sometimes these sweater knits are very stretchy, and they want to stretch out even on a hanger, and they hang too much on your body. So you may want to stabilize the shoulders and possibly even the neckline, although I don't do that very often. It just depends on the knit and the style of the garment. For the Maison top, because it has a neckband, I wouldn't necessarily stabilize the neck, but I would stabilize the shoulder. And we carry knit stay tape that's a 1/2 inch wide. We have it in white and black. I usually use white. It's the most common and works on everything. And I'm applying it on the wrong side of the garment, and I am centering it over the 5/8 inch seam allowance so that when I stitch my seam, I'm stitching through the stay tape. Now sometimes after you move a piece, you've cut it out, you've moved it, it grows on you just a little bit. So you want to go back to your pattern piece and cut this length of stay tape to the length of your pattern. And then when you're at the ironing surface, you're going to want to place this on the fabric and make sure that the fabric matches the width of this fusible stay tape. So this is just fusible on one side only. It's easy to fuse down, stays forever, and particularly since, of course, you're going to be stitching through it. So you can use that on the shoulders and on the neckline, or any other little bits and pieces of areas where things need to be stabilized. But shoulders are the primary area, and you want to think about that for sweater knits. When sewing sweater knits, because it's a knit, I'm going to use polyester thread. I think I've said this about 10,000 times, but I only use polyester thread for knits, no matter the weight. It can be ponte knits, heavyweight sweater knits, lightweight knits, tissue weight knits, whatever. It's polyester thread. I want the stretching capability of that thread. A polyester thread has a little bit of give to it. It's also a little bit stronger, and I want that give in that thread. Now needles. Everybody has their theory about needles. You want to use the needle that is friendly to your sewing machine and the fabric you are using. I use universal needles almost universally. And I use a size 70 or 75, rarely an 80 anymore. I've dialed those down to a little less of a size of a needle. But if you are having skip stitches or it's just not behaving, you want to have other needles on hand. Your jersey needles, your ballpoint needles, Microtex needles, all of those in all sizes. Because sometimes just changing the brand of needle and thread, or the size of the needle, or the type of the needle, can change how the stitch looks and performs in your sewing machine on your fabric. So when things are frustrating and you're not exactly happy with the look of a stitch, try different combinations of brands, sizes, types, and all of that. And you'll be amazed how that will change things. And sometimes, in order to sew some of these sweater knits, particularly the more open they are, I might stitch over some tissue paper from my previous patterns. I just save old patterns and tear them up and use that as a single layer of stabilizer between my feed dogs, throat plate, and my work. So don't forget to do that, particularly when you're starting out. You know, you have your presser foot on the edge of something and it's not level, particularly with sweater knits that have a certain thickness, more than other knits perhaps. So your presser foot is not level, it's back on its heels, so to speak. I put a little piece of tissue paper under the work and it starts off right away. I always use a walking foot. I happen to have a sewing machine both here at the studio and at home that has a built-in even feed feature. It's engaged 100% of the time, unless I forget. And I've changed a presser foot and had to release it and forget to put it back. And I always know because I get puckers and the fabric does not move through the sewing machine as easily, as evenly. So that even feed feature is a fabulous feature. If you're thinking about buying a new sewing machine, that's a feature I would investigate. If you can afford that level of sewing machine, go for it. But if not, buy a walking foot, either the brand that goes with your sewing machine or you can buy generic walking feet that should fit most brands. You can check that out. But I can't sew without that feature anymore. Seam finish options. My options are very similar to what I use on my standard jersey knits. I'm going to sew a straight stitch with my 2.4 millimeter stitch length on the seam allowance line. I'm not using a zigzag or that knit stitch. The knit stitch is too hard to remove if I have to, and it doesn't relax. It's too strong, so to speak. Some people use a small zigzag. I don't even do that. And then I want to serge finish using 3 threads, the 2 raw edges together, so I have essentially a combined seam allowance that I'm going to press one direction. But if that's not working for you, and you're working with something that has some openings in the weave, then you might want to zigzag stitch along the seam line so that you're going to catch a little more fabric back and forth. Yes, you're going to be going through some of the openings, you're sewing through air, but it'll work. And then I might still serge finish the edges using 3 thread. 3 thread overlocking or serging is all I'm ever going to do as a finishing tool. I never use 4 threads for finishing, and I rarely use 4 threads as a seam itself. Those are special conditions. So for me, it's usually a combination of straight stitch on my sewing machine, finishing the edges on my overlock serger. So how do you deal with the edges? Well, in the case of the Maison Top, which is right here, I have a sleeve hem, and because this particular sweater knit did not look good as a raw edge, I have 3 thread serged the edge using my isocord thread, which we've talked about many times, and I've used my fusee web, fuse that little line of glue onto the edge of the fabric of the hem, removed the paper so that I can glue my hems in place. And then in this case, I've used my cover stitch feature on my new serger overlock cover stitch combo machine. But if you don't have that, you can top stitch, you could zigzag, you could choose the stitch that you want. People ask me all the time about twin needle sewing. I never use twin needles. I've not been successful personally in getting a nice flat look, but if you are successful with that, great. It does give you the simulation of a cover stitch feature. I don't care for it so much on the back side. It tends to draw things up a little bit. But again, it is a nice stretchy stitch, which really is not important in the case of this sleeve. It's not as if this sleeve needs to expand to either get the garment on or in the wearing of it. So to me, a straight stitch is perfectly suitable for this kind of sleeve. But then on the hems, I've used the binding and at the neckline. And this is cover stitched. If you don't have that, you can top stitch it. Now, in the case of this is the Maison Top, the new pattern that's just out yesterday, first day. This is an older pattern, the Eureka Top, and this is in a sweater knit. This is actually, I was looking at this today, this is actually the wrong side of the sweater knit, which is a little bit fuzzier, which is sometimes happens with sweater knits. You can use either side, and we liked the idea of the more subdued coloration of this when the wrong side had a more vibrant look and colorway to it. But all of the edges have been bound in another knit, in another lighter weight tissue knit. And so you want to determine how wide you want this finished binding. And let's say in this case, this looks to be about 5/8 of an inch. Well, with turn of the cloth, as they call it, some take up, I sewed this strip of binding at 1/2 inch. And I left that. I didn't trim the seam out. So then this binding gets wrapped to the back side. and you can pin in the ditch, vertically in the ditch, parallel to the ditch, and stitch in that ditch. And then on the back side, because this jersey won't ravel, you can trim that really close and it'll look the same on both sides. This is when I use the Karen K. Buckley scissors. I like those as trimming scissors for something close like this. So I like this kind of finish. I think not only does it really deal with the raw edges of sweater knits really nicely, but it's just a great detail to look at anyway. You know, we have a lot of stripes in our repertoire at the Sewing Workshop. We like to use stripes for bindings, but this could be a solid color. But I do think that the binding on this sort of treatment needs to be a different weight than the sweater knit. Had we used the sweater knit as binding, we would have gotten kind of a rolled lump at the bottom. Maybe that's a look you like, but I think we'd prefer to have something that doesn't really stand out too much. So that's a really great look for Eureka. So the Eureka and the Maison. Now I have on the Liberty shirt. The Liberty shirt is normally a shirt with buttons and a collar. Everything else is the same. Well, we have a tutorial called the Liberty Knit Top tutorial, and in that tells you how to modify your Liberty pattern to make a knit top. So it's easy to do. Maybe you don't need the tutorial, but sometimes it's just nice to have all that together. This has been cut on the center fold. My necklace from Nora that she made for me. I don't know if you're watching today, Nora, but thank you very much. Love this necklace. So take this off and you can see that this has a regular binding. So we've talked about this before in previous tutorials, and it's all over the place in our knit tutorials and teaching. And we're going to be talking about this concept in the January 22nd video class for the Maison. But I had to make my own pattern for this binding. And I used my curve runner to measure the finished circumference of the neck. And then I calculated 7/8 of that number so that I knew that this piece needed to be 7/8 smaller than the original circumference of the neckline. So we've done that before. I think you can refer back to other videos to watch that. So thank you, Nora, for making my neck look good. All right, but on this particular pattern, I have just 3 threads serged the raw edges of the hems. These are deep hems, 3-inch hems, and then I've top stitched. And it's perfectly fine to top stitch this because there's no strain or stress on the hemlines of this. And so it's not like I'm going to be popping seams and all of that. Just as a side note, this particular pattern has some interesting lines that are diagonal in the front. Makes me look skinnier, maybe. And so I have put a little bit of a flat insertion of some black wool jersey. I'm not sure it was wool, maybe knit jersey, we'll just call it knit, in the seam just to define that seam, which I think is an attractive little detail. And I use the same binding for the neck binding as well. There's one little glitch in making this, in that this normally has a facing and there's a cutout at the bottom hem where the facing connects the garment. And that's the one thing that tutorial talks about, is how to fill out that total hemline in the front, because I made that mistake the first time and I have a big old hole in the front of my garment, so you don't want that. All right, so that is pretty much how to deal with these sweater knits, and if you have some questions, let me know. One thing back to the ribbing. When I was making this, I used our normal neck binding pattern piece and the normal hemband pattern piece, and I put the neck binding on, and oh, it was bad. It was too big, it was not lying smooth, it wasn't shaped like it should be, and so I yanked it off, and I cut off 2 inches off of the binding because it's ribbing. Ribbing is so stretchy that I had to cut off 2 inches at the neck binding, and I cut off 3 inches off of the hip band, or the hem band. So just remember that if you're using ribbing versus the regular jersey, then you're going to want to have to experiment just a little bit. This binding on the Maison is a little bit wider than normal. Most of our bindings are a 1/2 inch finished. This is 3/4, and I like that. I think it's a nice look, and I think it's a nice proportion to the oversized look of this garment. All right, let's look at some fabrics. I'm in a blue-green mood, I guess, this morning. I don't know. But we'll start here in the bottom with our black. You can see that this is a printed sweater knit. So on the reverse side, it's a medium gray. So this is the loop side of the sweater knit. And it has this wonderful black print on it that has some areas where it's not been printed, so you're seeing the original medium gray knit through that. I like the abstract feeling of this. I think, and it's a wonderful drapey weight. This actually would make either a top or a bottom. I don't think it's just reserved for the top. You could obviously put black with it. I think you could put white with it, or any really strong color as a solid color for the top. I think this nice neutral gray works with it as well. This is a jersey knit that is cotton and spandex, 95% cotton, 5% spandex, so it has a little bit of stretch to it, quite a bit of stretch actually, 4-way stretch. And this would make great joggers or the Maison top as well. This is another sweater knit. These 3 sweater knits actually are from the same company, and so they're all printed on the same background, the same medium gray background. This one is very contemporary and abstract, and I love all the combinations of the change of character. This has a little bit of a herringbone texture print to it. This is linear. This is horizontal linear, but I think that's really freeform and fun. And I love it with this teal color that is also, this one is cotton, rayon, and spandex. And this is actually a French terry, but the terry texture on the back side is so fine that you really don't even know that it's a French terry. But great top, great bottom, and a color that everyone can wear. This one is the same, printed on the same gray background, but this more watery, sort of sea-like look to it. Ocean blues and greens, and I love this too. This would go with black, and it goes with the teal. It would go with some aqua colors. But I can see combos like this going on with your Maison top and bottom, or Eureka, or Liberty, or whatever you want to make. On this side, we have this fabric we have available. We have a lot of, we just ordered in a lot of this fabric, and because I'm just crazy about it. I love its texture. I love the fact that it has the loopy, raised texture to it. And yes, it is a horizontal stripe, but it doesn't really read stripe so much. It's more of a texture, in my opinion, but I love this red. And we do have the matching ribbing in the ruby red. I don't think that's what we call it. What do we call it? Red. This is red. We have the red knit that goes with this for the binding and the hem band. And then we have it in another color. I get emails from paint companies, since I'm a former interior designer, Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore, and yesterday I got an email from Sherwin-Williams that the January color of the month is called Urbane Bronze. Not urban, urbane, bronze. Yes, and it was this color. So I'm showing this in January because this is Sherwin-Williams color of the month. But I love the fact that it has this light camel color in it and a mint green color in it as well. So you could mix it with the beautiful mint jersey. This one has a bit of a heather to it, so it's not a solid camel, like camel. It does have a little bit of a gray undertone to it, and I like both of these with that knit so much. And so you could use this as your bindings, but I like the idea of using either one of these colors as your binding if you're making the Maison top in that. And this really feels like a sweater knit to me. It's not heavy, but it just has that classic Tommy Hilfiger sweater sort of thing. I would have worn this my whole life. You know, it's not that trendy. It just is a good classic stripe knit with the black, lime green, the toast color, and gray. And then, but I like it with this particular green jersey. So those are good combinations. Have a couple of others. This one is more like what I've been talking about with the open weave. There's some openings in this. This looks like a hand knit. And then it has the couched yarn on top of it in this wonderful swirl floral type effect. We have two fabrics that look very similar to the Eureka top, to this one. They're slightly different colorways, but they're the same fabric. So as I said before, one side is fuzzier than the other. This is the fuzzy side. And this is the technically right side. But I don't know, there's something about that fuzzy side that's pretty cool. The right side has a little more texture to it, and the fuzzy side is fuzzy. But gray, black, grays and blacks. And then we have it also in the red and gray. So this is the fuzzy side. And you can see we don't have too much left of either one of these. So if you like them, probably ought to order it fairly quickly. And here's the wrong side, which is a little more, or this is the right side, technically, a little more subdued. But pick your side. It doesn't matter which side you use, ever, actually, of any fabric. Now, I had great hopes of having my new joggers made for you today. And I don't know, I just got into the cleaning out the basement thing, I guess. And so for this particular Maison top, at some point, hopefully this week, I will have my new joggers in this mauve, pale, blush pink color. So I'm excited about that. I like that combination very much. So as you can see, I got as far as cutting the yardage off the bolt, and I have my pattern ready. That's it. Great intentions, didn't happen. All right, we have some specials. We may have some questions. Do we have any questions? Let me do the specials first. So we have the Eureka pattern, Eureka top pattern, Eureka shirt pattern, the Eureka top and skirt pattern at 15% off, the Maison top and jogger, $18. And if you are so confident, Series 10 member, don't forget to order this pattern. We have the tutorial of how to turn the Liberty shirt pattern into the knit top with or without a cowl neck for $16. And all of the fabrics that I've shown here today are 15% off for another week.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're wearing the Liberty.
And I'm wearing the Liberty.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
What did I say?
The Eureka.
Oh, I said Eureka. Oh, my. I'm wearing the Liberty. Oh, and I'm wearing it over the swing tee, by the way.
Good.
So I like the way this sort of is full underneath here, and you can see that extra layer of color.
Okay. We had some questions about the content of the fabrics, the print
Okay.
sweater knits.
These are all polyester and spandex. 95% polyester, 5% spandex. The one nice thing about polyesters and spandexes is they wash beautifully, and they hold their shape, and they don't bag out. I like that about that kind of fiber.
Okay. I was using a sweater knit, and I had tunneling on the cover stitch hem.
Oh.
I did loosen the loop retention. Any suggestions? Can I use tissue paper underneath?
Are they able to hear you?
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely use tissue paper. Sometimes when you are on and off of the reverse side raw edge and it's uneven, that tunneling might happen. You might try shifting over just a little bit and try to just barely catch the edge of that raw edge instead of being so far off of it. I'm not sure if that's what you're doing, but I know what you're talking about, and I think it's because of the different levels of thickness. So try shifting that cover stitch over just a hair, even if you have to leave a little bit of the raw edge showing. I think it might help it. Yes, loosening the tension will help. Paper should help. I think you're going to have to play around with the placement of where you're stitching it.
What stitches do you recommend for finishing edges on a sewing machine?
Say that again. What finishes do?
For finishing edges on a sewing machine versus a serger.
Well, I don't.
We do keep getting that question. So
we do keep getting this question, and so obviously there are people, a lot of people who do not have a serger. I do think that is something you should put on your bucket list to get at some point. It really ups the quality of the interior of your garments. So it depends on the fabric as to how you deal with things. If you're using a knit, I wouldn't finish the edges at all. If you're using a knit that's curly, I would sew the seam and then about 1/4 inch from that, stitch the 2 layers of the seam allowance together, and then I would trim the remaining part of the curl of the seam allowance next to that edge. I would, if it's a woven fabric, I would consider French seams, Hong Kong finishes, turned and stitched edges. But on knits, I think your best bet is to sew it together and trim it. So 2 rows of stitching and trim it close. If it's super ravelly, like super ravelly sweater knit, I would still do that and then see what your zigzag stitch or your overlocking stitch on a sewing machine looks like. I think you're going to have to play around and make some tests on that.
I noticed the jogger kit for the Maison includes 1 yard of elastic. What if your waist is larger than 36 inches?
Well, 36 inches, the lengths of the elastics are determined based on, they're always smaller than your waist. So 36 inches, I'd have to look at the back of one of our patterns, but 36 inches of elastic would go up to in the 40s of actual waist measurement. So if you're having to increase the width of the elastic from 36, you're likely to be increasing the width of the garment as well. So when you measure the finished, let's say XXL of the joggers, before the elastic's in it, I don't know what it measures, but it's going to measure a lot more than 36. So then you're going to have to alter that, and then you're going to put the elastic around, a piece of elastic around your waist, draw it up so it's comfortable, and figure out what the length is that you need. But elastic is always cut several inches smaller than the actual finished garment.
I mean, I guess if they needed extra elastic, they could order extra elastic.
Yes, you would want to make a note.
Contact us.
If you're ordering a kit from us or ordering a fabric and some elastic, make a note in the bottom of the order that you want 1.25 yards or 1.5 yards elastic. We'll just give it to you. We're not going to charge you for it, the extra.
Okay. Oh, can you talk about, so it was asked whether the regular pattern for like the printed pattern, will that be available for the Maison?
We have gotten some questions about printed pattern for the Maison and joggers. I think I addressed this a couple of weeks ago, but the printing facility in Manhattan, Kansas, which is McCall's, that is the only facility in the world that prints on tissue pattern. They've been shut down for quite a while, not due to COVID, but due to some glitches in their computer system, and they are not back up and running yet. And when and if they are back up and running, then there will be a tremendous backlog in getting caught up with printed patterns that have been sitting there all fall ready to print. So at the moment, for us and all pattern companies who use tissue pattern, printed patterns are not possible for new patterns. We can't even reorder old ones at this point that we're out of. So that's why it's got to be, if you want the pattern now, it has to be digital. I'm really thinking it's going to be late spring at the earliest before we ever see a printed Maison Top and Joggers pattern. I could be wrong. I don't really know because we haven't gotten word from them, but we do know they're not open.
What's the length of the Maison Top?
The length of the Maison Top?
Like where does it hit? Is it hip length,
It's definitely mid-hip.
Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, the original garment that we designed, the band did not really touch the hips. And then we decided to bring that in so that it does. So it's meant to lightly touch your hips. It's not like some sweatshirts that you buy where it's really drawn in and then you get this big blousy sweatshirt sort of looseness above that. This is meant to be a slight easing, but yet touch your body a bit.
You mentioned a stay tape in the joggers kit. Is that on the bias?
Stay tape is not on the bias. Stay tape is straight cut. Knit fusible tapes, and any knit, it's not stretchier on the bias than it would be on the lengthwise or the crosswise grain. So there's no reason to ever cut bias in a knit unless you want the design of something. Let's say you wanted a stripe binding and you want the stripes to go diagonally, then you might cut the binding on the diagonal. But in terms of fitting and stretching and molding and all of that, crosswise grain is the stretchiest part of things like this and knits.
Okay. Can you advise the best way to join pieces of knit fabric to make a patchwork effect?
Well, I would say you could play around with just overlapping, removing seam allowances on the top pieces and keeping seam allowances on the bottom pieces, and just stitching either a single stitch or using flat locking or double 2 rows of stitching. If the raw edges don't look good like that, then you're probably going to have to seam things, and that's going to require inside and outside corner stitching. But I would try overlapping seams and use your fusee web to glue things down and get things all in place, and then you'll be able to stitch. But flat locking is a great way to, and a great look for, and even cover stitching on the reverse side is really cool to look at to sew edges.
Someone wanted to ask how they can find out more about your necklace that Nora made.
Well, Nora, if I get more than one question about your necklace, I may have to email you. I don't know a thing about it, but I will say this, that these are rubbery. And I know that Nora does this very special beading technique, and I don't know the name of it, but she's very proficient at it. And so this is all a beaded tube with small black beads and some pearl and some crystal beads, and then she has these wonderful clasps that are magnetic, which I love. So that's about all I can tell you about this necklace. But one Christmas, Nora gave all of us one of these necklaces, and I've loved it ever since.
Can you go over how So Confident 21 will work? She's ordered her kits, downloaded patterns, ordered them from PDF plotting, printed instructions, and what is next?
All right. You are ready, other than getting your pattern. When you get the pattern home, you'll want to make sure that you are cutting out the size that you want. The Maison Top is really oversized, and I know that there will be people who will be wanting to make it a size smaller, which is perfectly fine. It is meant to be an oversized piece. When you look at the photographs of Erin, in the emails and on our website in this garment. You can see that it's loose fitting and it's meant to be. But be sure and measure your body and measure the finished circumference of the bust of the top, and make sure you've got plenty of ease. Make sure it's the length that you want, and get your pattern ready. And then you're going to get cut out of your fabric once you get the kit. Get it cut out, get it marked. Well, first of all, you're going to wash your fabric if you want to. If you're a pre-washer, do that. And then you're going to cut out and get things marked. So you're going to get ready to sew. Get your bobbin wound, get the right needle, maybe do some experimenting a little bit on the fabric as to what needle and thread combination. We have sent you in the kits Metler, Metricine, polyester thread, but get that all worked out, all the glitches now for the sewing. So then you will get an email the week of January 22nd that will give you the link to the video that you can watch. You can watch me make the garment and point out the highlights of what you need to pay attention to, start to finish. And you can follow along, or you can watch it at your leisure from now until forever and make the top at your own pleasure and time. And then the week after that, which will be the last week in January, you'll get another email with the setup of how we're going to communicate with live calls, Zoom question and answer sessions. I will not have prepared material for those calls. I'm going to be responding to the questions that you're going to be answering. There'll be a monitor. Alex is going to be the monitor, and she will be taking the questions and then feeding them to me, and I'll be answering them live for you. That will be recorded so that you can watch that at a later time. We're going to be offering a couple of times on it so that the working girls can watch it at a certain time, and those who are wanting to watch it in the daytime or whatever can watch it. So you'll have an option of a couple of times to tune in on that. So that's the process. A first of the month email of how to get ready. You've got, what would that be, 3 weeks to get ready, and then you watch the video class on how to make it, and then a week after that, hopefully you've had a chance to make it, and you're going to have questions, and you can ask the questions then. That's the month setup. We managed to get almost all of the kit orders out of the door yesterday. It was really a great day. We're going to probably be able to finish it up today for what was ordered yesterday. So we're trying to stay on top of this so that you will have your fabric in time to get it prepared and set up and cut out. Hopefully you'll be ready to go by the time the video is ready. I will say this, this is our last time to do Facebook Live in this space, we think. We have rented another space above us, an apartment actually, and as of tomorrow we're setting up a new studio where we will be recording the Facebook Lives and the videos for the classes for So Confident. So I'm really excited about that. So I'll have a little bit of a different look hopefully next week. We're just hoping that our internet connection and all that's going to work, and if not, you'll see me back here. But one way or the other, we're not letting Facebook Lives go at all. We're just maybe doing them in a different space. But the videos are going to be recorded in this new space.
When cutting single layer, do you trace the pattern twice and tape together?
Well, I should, but I don't. I'm too lazy. That is a great way to do it. And I've done that, and I encourage people to do it. But the reality is, I pin along the fold line on my fabric, cut out one half, and flip it, and cut out the second half. And I do describe that in the letter that I sent you for cutting out and preparing. That's gone over how I do it. But sure, if you know, it's always a good idea to do a full piece to know exactly if you have the right fabric and where you're going to place it. And remember with knits can have a nap. You may not be able to see it when it's flat on a table, but when you hang it up on you or someplace else, you might see a tonal change or some shadowing. Be sure and lay your pieces out in the same direction through the whole yardage single layer. And don't forget to flip that sleeve. Boy, have I done that. You know, you've got to remember to go like that.
Is fleece too heavy for the joggers?
Not at all. Fleece is perfect for the joggers. Yeah.
Okay. So you said that the Maison is oversized. So if you're traditionally a small, I mean, I guess it would be oversized as a small. And would you go to
this
an
is the extra small right here. I don't know if that gives you any sense. I know it's probably hard with proportion on a Facebook presentation, but you could, if you're a small normally in most of our patterns, you could easily make an extra small. I actually can wear an extra small. I'm a small in most things. And I have a small, and I made the extra small. And when I put the extra small on, it just didn't have the right look. I didn't have that oversized look that I really wanted, so I will be making future smalls, just like every other pattern. But the extra small fits, it's just not the look that I wanted.
Is the jogger pattern based on another one of your pant patterns?
The jogger pattern is based on the Chesney pants. And that is also based on the Ikena pants, which is a discontinued pattern. But if you have that, yes, that's the same crotch shape, the same height, the same, starts out the same hip width, but we've changed the bottoms and we've added the pocket. And the pocket actually comes from the West End pants and the Chesney pants. So I would say this is most like the Chesney with a wider waistband and the drawstring. So some modifications, but crotch shape and fit would be Chesney or Ikena.
Okay. So Sue has the new Bernina cover stitch serger. So how hard is it to change it, like switch it back and forth? Are there any cons that you have found to the machine?
Oh, well, I haven't done it yet. I've only been cover stitching on it. So I'll have to answer that question next time, I guess. I needed to cover stitch, like immediately. And I got that machine out of the box, and I read how to set that up for cover stitching. It was beautiful, easy to follow, no glitches whatsoever in the threading or the performance of that cover stitching. But I still have my other Bernina L460, I think it is, serger set up beside it. So I kept the two set up, and I have yet to make the transition to switching it. So I don't know. I know that Bernina people who are out there are cringing as I say this because they're going to tell me that it's super easy. But I'll let you know personally soon.
On the Maison top, you serged the sleeve edges and then, excuse me, and then cover stitched on top of that instead of using the cover stitch.
Well,
why?
If I said that, I think I didn't mean that. What did I do? No, I did not serge first. I'm so sorry. I think I did say that, and I'm wrong. I just cover stitched and caught the raw edge. Yeah, sorry. If I were top stitching or zigzagging or some other sewing machine treatment on the outside, I would have serged it first. Yeah, I'm not sure what I said.
There's a question about the paper sizes for the Maison. Which one should I use to get printed at a Kinko's?
Why don't you answer that, Erin?
So you will see there's quite a few options. There is a top option and a jogger option. If you're going to get it printed at a copy center or send it off to PDF plotting, if you're in the United States, you do want the ones that are labeled with a 36 by, say, 77 for the top, I believe it is, or 36 by 55. That's giving you what the size of the paper is, and those are the ones you're going to want to get printed from, on a plotter. And the other one is it's labeled home printer, and that's the one you're going to want to print at home on your letter size paper.
And if they are outside the United States?
There is a version called the A0, and so that is the correct paper size outside of the United States.
Okay. We've had great success with that company. We get quick results, and we think it's very inexpensive compared to other places. We do know that mail service is going on. You can always request. We've been using a lot of UPS lately. In fact, if you're ordering things from us, you might choose the UPS option. Honestly, the price is just so similar, and we're having much better results with shipping UPS than we are by the U.S. mail.
And I did just add to the Maison the option to get both the top and the joggers printed, so which might be even a little bit cheaper if you're going to get it printed. So you can print off the top and the joggers all on one sheet.
And what size sheet is that?
I believe it's over 100 inches, like 120 inches long, I believe.
Okay.
Where do we get answers to our fit questions?
Answers to your kit questions?
Fit.
Fit questions for...
It doesn't say.
For anything? Well, you can email me at linda@sewingworkshop.com for some fitting advice. You can call me. We have fit issues of, well, you know, we have the fitting book coming out. And for those of you who are so confident 2020, it'll be in the mail to you and it'll be in your account soon. And, you know, it tackles lots of fitting questions. So you may want to invest in the fitting book in 2021 when we get it out. If you have very personal fitting issues about a specific pattern and a specific issue, you're probably going to be best to email me.
Can you hold up the middle blue one? They want to know the repeat on that.
Oh, the repeat on this? Let's see. Well, oh.
Of course I had to,
of course.
Had to get that one down.
Yeah. Have I gotten to a repeat yet?
Will look like it repeats. Do you want me to hold?
First of all, this would not be anything I would try to match if that's some kind of question here. Would you, Erin?
No, and I think you can see the scale when you hold it up to yourself. I think that's...
Yeah, of course, I'm holding it horizontally. It would go the other way.
True.
But...
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see if we have any. We had a lot of questions today. So.
Okay.
They're concerned about the 3/4 inch neck binding laying flat.
Well, that's what you're going to learn in that class. I'm going to show you how to do it. But it's all about proportion, and it's all about steaming and shaping over a ham. But it's mostly about proportion of length to the neckline. Because you're right, the wider you get, the harder it is to get that to lie flat.
We had a question about the So Confident private Facebook and Pinterest pages. We are working on those, and you will get a link soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Full bust adjustment.
On the Maison?
On the Maison top.
Standard. There's nothing mysterious about it. If you, in the fitting book and in the Fitting the Bust tutorial that we have on our website, we do have a technique for increasing the bust without a dart in a knit. So I would check that out. Because then, I don't think you'd want to have a dart necessarily in this, but it's easy to increase the bust without increasing it down here as well, but to get more fullness through the bust with that technique.
Can you make the Maison top a long sleeve?
Yes, you can make the Maison top in long sleeves. In fact, our friend Samantha made this with longer sleeves and actually put some elastic or binding here so you could have a full sleeve that came in. It was really nice what she did. I wouldn't necessarily make the sleeve this full clear down. I would definitely taper it, or I would definitely draw it in some way, either with binding or elastic casing.
Can you show a close-up of the red and pink boucle Maison?
Sure.
I think that's what the question is.
This has a sort of pearl color and a pale gray color as the yarn stripes with the red background.
And it's kind of a cherry red, you said?
Cherry red. Yeah. And then there's a difference in the weave, even in the red, so it looks lighter through here and darker. But it's a really interesting fabric.
I think we do have quite a few questions, and some of them we might have to get to just responding via Facebook. I think some of these might be better answered that way, but I am going through to see. Sorry. That might be the best option.
Don't forget that if you are a So Confident member, Series 10, in the email that we sent out on Monday, you have a code to use for your discount on the top pattern and the kits and all fabrics and patterns for the rest of the year. So keep that code handy. I know it seems easy for you to just say to us in your comments, I'm a member, give me the discount. It's already gone through our system. That requires us to go back into our system, issue refunds. It's a little bit of an extra step for us. It would be great if you could just use the code at the get-go. So keep it handy, as well as your username and passwords. Keep those handy. You're going to be using these all year long. So keep them handy.
And there are some questions about So Confident in the Maison Top Fit questions. Again, those will be some things you answer.
Okay.
In the tutorial or in the video, and
yes.
So, okay.
Yeah. Well, give me an example of one of the fit.
Sorry, something about sloping shoulders.
Sloping shoulders? Oh, okay. I'm not going to be addressing particular shoulder issues in the class. The class is a construction class. So if you have issues about fitting on the Maison, you better email me. And I can answer those in the Q&A as well. But the actual format of the video class is more about construction.
Okay, and they would like you to hold up the top fabric there.
Okay.
Can you get it down?
This one's lighter weight for some reason. This is beautiful, I think.
Very nice. Okay. All right, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, again, thank you so much for your amazing response to So Confident Series 10. We're so excited about the whole year. Can't wait to get to our new studio tomorrow, and we'll see you next week, Facebook Live, and see you on the 22nd for the first video class.